What about the situation? Okay, author uncertain, date possibly 95 CE, let's say. Okay, then what's happening at this time? Into what context is this narrator writing, and do these visions, what are they supposed to, what is the situation on the ground? So we have clues within the text itself. This is all our internal evidence. So we have lots of mention of troubles and persecution, right? So we have in chapter 2, Antipas, my witness, who was killed among you. Seems like some sort of martyrdom, violence happening. We don't know how far widespread, but we have the naming of a person who is a witness who has been killed. And then chapter 20, this is now towards the end, right, towards the judgment. I saw the souls of those who had been beheaded for their testimony to Jesus and for the word of God. So mentioning of martyred peoples who were beheaded for their faith, some reason. The problem with this, though, is that we don't have hard evidence for a systemic and widely applied persecution under Domitian, right? So we do have definitely social ostracization, the understanding that Christians or the strange sect, Jesus followers at the time, were excluded in particular ways, possibly spots of violence and persecution. But it wasn't as if there was a empire-wide systemic persecution that you might be led to believe, right, by reading this. So it's debated of how widespread or how systematic it was, but there does seem to be some thing happening at the time that we do have oppression, violence happening in certain communities. So as I've said, we have in chapter 12 and 13, there's the mention or allusion, right, of getting the mark of the beast. This is a notorious section in which people are branded with the mark of the beast, and they have to do that in order to buy and sell. So there does seem to be some way of excluding communities or reference to allusion to not being able to participate in commerce or in marketplace and exchanges socially, possibly because of how one worships. So that might be something. Then we do have, again, the mention to the threat to Jerusalem. Maybe this is looking back at 70 CE. This is the trampling for 42 months as a possibility. And then we'll get into this in just a second. There is definitely, it seems like, a need to separate out who are true believers, true, faithful, obedient followers of this movement as versus those who are false, right? So there's a label of a synagogue as the synagogue of Satan. There's also the mention of false prophets. So this is also of a piece of what we see with early Christian literature in the first century, right? In which we have mentions of beliefs and sects that faithful communities should be warned off from, false teachers, false preachers, false wandering teachers as well that need to be rejected, right? So there is definitely a moment of you need to differentiate. You do not believe in these things. These are false. These are not authentic. So there's a line being drawn definitely within the book of Revelation that's part of the concern of the author that's being expressed in this book. Okay, so the best evidence we have for this situation, of course, is the letter to the seven churches, and that comes in chapters 2 to 3. So the seven churches, we have Smyrna, Ephesus, Pergamum, Thyatira, Sardis, Philadelphia, and Laodicea. You see that laid out, right, in this geographic area of Asia Minor, now modern Turkey. And then Patmos is an island off the coast of Asia Minor, right? So we have the narrator placing himself facing Asia Minor from his place in exile, which is also a mark, right, of being a faithful witness, that he's been exiled, he's been persecuted in some way. So even his geographic location is part of his stance of, look, I have been faithful, I am a witness to all this, and I share in any of the persecution that you've been subjected to, because look at where I am. And then writing towards Asia Minor, where the circle of communities exists, in which we hear described and transcribed different letters that the Son of Man appearing is then delivering, right? So these messages that John is writing down is directly from God to Asia Minor.